Okay, so go into Visual Studios and press the play button to start up the actual application in your browser. And let's wait till it starts up. As you can see here, a new tab was opened up. And this is our page. But we don't have a link to notes automatically generated because we still have to change out the main page so that it'll point to our new functionality. So let's go to the URL, and if you remember from the pattern for our URL route, the first part is the actual controller name, which is notes, and the second part is the action, which is index. Press enter, and it takes us to our page. So it's working just as we expected, which is great. So all we have to do now is create the other files or other actions that we will need in order to create the create, edit, delete, and details page. So let's create those. Actions. Create, return a view. So what return view does is return the actual HTML file automatically. You can also have return redirect, and you would specify where you're going to redirect your page to, as well as other options that we will come across later on, or delve into later on. Edit. Delete. And now we have to create the corresponding views for each of those actions in our notes folder. So let's add a view, create, and add. Add another view, edit. Okay, so I've created an individual view for the create, delete, details, and edit pages. Now in the controllers, as you see here, we're returning those pages. However, nothing is happening. So we're going to use an object-oriented principle called polymorphism in order to create more than one version of particular actions. The reason why we're doing this is because initially when the page is accessed, there will be nothing set. However, when we actually want to create a note element or note object, we're going to fill in a form, and we're going to have to pass in that form into our class. So when the form is empty, the first iAction result on the create page, the first iAction result create action will be called. When it's not empty, and then we are actually creating object, the public iAction result create with the parameter note passed in will be called. But now we ran into an interesting problem. As you can see here, we need to modify or add that information to the database. So we're going to create a constructor for our notes controller, ctor tab, and we'll automatically create it. And within our constructor, we're going to pass in application db context. What this does is automatically create an application DB context object, which will allow us to access the database. So as you can see here, it's using something called dependency injection to automatically pass in an object via our services, add DB context. So whenever we pass in the application DB context in our constructor of a controller, it'll automatically pass it in application DB context, which is using SQL Server, and is connected to our configuration string specified in default. Okay, so now we want to be able to access it in the rest of our file. What I like to do is create a private attribute, call it _context, because it's not accessible from everywhere else. And it'll also be an application DB context. Private read only, because we won't be able to change it. Application DB context, and we'll set it over here. _context is equal to context. Okay, so via the context object in our file, we'll be able to modify elements in our database, or add and create, or edit and delete. So we can go back to our action in our create action. We'll go _context.add note. Okay, and next we will say context. We've added it, but we have to commit those changes to our database. So save changes, and boom. And then we could use a redirect to our index. So we'll call it the notes/index URL. Okay, so now what we have to do is save it. Now we have to actually add in the appropriate form to our create view. Okay, so in our create view, we will add in our form HTML. As you can see at the top, we are importing our from scratch.models.note file, and this basically specifies that this form, these elements in the form, will refer to each item in our notes model, as you can see here. Let's go back to create. So as you can see, we even have validation here. So div space ASP validation space summary for model only. It says the ASP action being performed is create, as in that's what it's going to be called over here. The ASP4 is the title element. That's going to be the element in notes that's called. The reason why they put that is because you could actually specify a different name using a tag, display, called display, in order to, which is a data annotation, in order to specify a different name from the variable name. So we could call this the title. Sorry, it is display, but you just say name equals. And then in your create statement for this label, it'll actually show the title instead of title. So it'll differ from the actual variable name. So over here, we'll have ASP4 title. We'll have ASP validation for title. So if we have a data annotation in our model that specifies criteria for this being a valid information, then it would check it over here, which we'll get to at another point in time. And we have our description. And then we have a submit that would actually call our notes controllers this function or action. Okay, so now we can create. So let's go to our index, and we need to be able to call that function. So let's create a link for it. Okay, so there's something I forgot from the notes controller. In order to reference the model after create, we should actually return the model after it's been created. Rather than using a redirect, we won't. We'll return to the create page, and we will return the actual model we just created. Furthermore, we're now going to add a reference in our index. I'm going to look at my old code. And basically what this will do, will create a link to our create action. So when we, in our index page for our notes. So ASP-action equals creates, we'll call our create page. Now in our layout menu, we want to create a link. And in our page menu, we want to create a link over here to our notes main page. So let's do that. We will go to shared folder under views, go to layout, and we will scroll down. We'll see there are two links there already. We'll just copy one of them, paste it. The controller should be changed to notes. The ASP action will be index, and then this will be notes. Okay, awesome. Let's play it and see what happens. Okay, now we have a link to notes. So click that, and we have our index page in notes. Let's click create. So this is interesting. An unhandled exception occurred while processing the request. Ambiguous match exception. The request matched multiple endpoints. From notes controller. Okay, so I see what happened here. Basically, when it called this, it wasn't sure of whether to use the first create or the second create. That is because when we first access the page, all the information will be passed in the URL. So this is essentially a GET call. However, when we're creating the data and submitting the form, we're making a POST, which will pass in the additional information hidden. So let's change this to say HTTP GET in square brackets. And for the next create, let's say HTTP POST. Okay, it's saved. Let's play. Start our program again. Go to notes, create new, and now we could actually create the data. So we'll say hello world, and boom. So now we just created it. I should have had a successfully created message shown, but I did not yet at least. But if we were to go and look at our database, in SQL Server Object Explorer, and look at the table notes and view the data, we'll see that the actual row has been created. Ta-da!